everyone. Welcome to day 4 and 5 of 7 days with Rio, in which I try to make sense of Rio and hopefully get to where I can actually run stuff in production. My original plan was to spend 2 days on the Riofile, day 4 and day 5, and make 2 videos, one about the more basic stuff and then one about the more complex stuff. But I've actually just spent the last 2 days with the Riofile trying to understand its place in the universe and what its limitations are. And unfortunately, at the moment, it has more limitations than I want it to have. So I've gone back and had some conversations with the Rio developers about, well, just about what they want it to be. And that's what I want to share with you. I want to paint a picture of what the Riofile aspires to be, why it exists, and where I think you'll be able to use it in the future, which in itself is a fantastic story. It's just, as beta software, it's not quite to the place where I can show you everything, but I'm going to show you some stuff. First, let me tell you a story. Back in the day, Rancher had an orchestrator called Cattle, and this was before Kubernetes was ever really a thing, and it came from Docker and Docker Compose. This orchestrator was extremely popular, and when Rancher changed to being 100% Kubernetes, there were a large number of Cattle users who were unhappy. The change itself was a difficult decision for Rancher to make, but I think it was the right decision, and I personally am glad that they made it. But they've never forgotten where they came from. There is still, for all of the buzz about Kubernetes, there is still a very large contingent of users out there who absolutely love Docker Swarm and Docker Compose. Right now, they're in an even greater state of limbo after the Mirantis acquisition of Docker, because nobody really knows what's going to happen with those particular pieces of the property. We need to get those people into Kubernetes, and we need to do it in a way that gives them access to the power of Kubernetes without necessarily needing to know all the ins and outs and nuts and bolts and the nitty-gritty details of it. Rio solves that problem for the developer community, and the Riofile is to Rio what Docker Compose was to just straight up Docker or even Swarm itself. The Riofile is a simple way to model resources that exist within Rio, and by running Rio up to continually modify those services over time. Let me show you how that works. Here's a very basic Rio file, which contains 2 sections, configs and services. In configs, there is essentially an index.html file. And in the service, we're going to run the nginx container, and we're going to take conf index.html, and we're going to write that out as user share nginx html index.html. If we run this, what we'll get is a web server serving a static page. So this example is totally contrived because it's unrealistic, but it just demonstrates how this is going to work. If I run Rio up, it's going to create a stack with the same name as my current working directory. A stack simply being a collection of Rio resources. That can be services, config maps, secrets, routers, endpoints, any of it. And if we come over here and visit the endpoint URL, then we see hello internet. The idea behind the Riofile is that you can make adjustments to the Riofile and then continue to run Rio up. Let's try and make this a little bit more realistic. So here we have a service called Rancher Demo, and so now if we run Rio up, this will completely gut what we've just deployed and replace it with something new. So going back to my known and loved and treasured example here, we can now come in and we can say, let's change the cow color to pink. And now we run Rio up. And in a moment, we'll see that pink comes into rotation. Basically what we've just done is we've done a Rio stage and a Rio promote, except we don't actually have versions. We just replaced the running version. So what if we wanted to do versioning and then promote it over time? Here you can see that we have three different services, yellow, pink, and blue. They all belong to the Rancher demo app, and they're all running a specific image. Yellow has a weight of 100. Pink and blue have a weight of 0. Now when we run Rio up, we've essentially staged those other two images. Back over in the browser, you can see that yellow is in rotation, and over time, pink will begin to fade out. All right, so there they are, and you can see their weight. And now if we go into the Riofile, we can adjust Now, this is just going to immediately replace yellow with pink and blue. If we wanted to do this over time, we can add an additional flag here for traffic rollout config. Before we do that, let's actually add auto scaling. All right, so I changed yellow back to 100% because what I want to do is get the auto scaling config in place for yellow. And then we'll hit it with some load, and then we'll go ahead and do the promotion. We've got more yellow cows coming in now. So let's go ahead and adjust our weight. Almost immediately, you see that we've got blue and pink coming in. We've still got yellow in rotation because it's going to be doing the rollout over time. And also because we changed values of yellow, yellow was also redeployed. So that's why you saw those yellow containers come in. And now you see them all fading out. And now you see blue and pink ramping up. This is still totally contrived. It's a little bit easier than using Rio Stage, Rio Promote. It gets you into a more GitOps-style, templated, Git being the source of truth type of repeatable deployment. But I still don't think that it's a very good example. There's a lot that the Riofile aspires to do, all the way down to deploying Kubernetes manifests directly. So let's just go through its blocks and we can talk about what it wants to provide there. And then I'll show you another demo that's a little bit more interesting. This reference represents all of the stuff that's currently available in the Riofile. So you can create config maps. You can create external services according to any of the parameters that exist for the external service resource. You can create all of your services. And if you want to build them directly from a Git repo, then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that you can add here. One of the super cool things about the Riofile is that it can monitor a Git repo, and when there's a change to the Riofile, rebuild and redeploy. So this, again, goes back to the GitOps style, but it's done automatically for you. If you deploy a service from a Git repo, Rio can watch it and continue to do updates. And you can narrow that down to a branch, so you could have it watch the master branch or release branch, And you can, of course, update those things on the fly. You can override stuff in the container. You can set your ports. You can set resource limitations. You can create, sorry, not create secrets. You can mount existing secrets into the pods. You can create configs or mount them. So I guess you have a config up above, and then you can mount that into the pod here. You can set up your health checks, liveness and readiness probes, and then various other container things. You start getting into more complicated Kubernetes ideas like node affinity and pod affinity or anti-affinity. These are good to have in the Riofile. You want to be able to say, I don't want all of my pods running on the same node. I want them spread out across the entire infrastructure. Being able to just designate that right here in the Riofile is fantastic. Now you get into routers. I talked to the Rio developers today about routers, about use cases for routers. Routes give you access to the matching and routing configuration that Glue provides. Something else that Rio provides that's not quite fully baked is templating. You can create an external answer file with key value pairs. It's just a YAML file. And then you can either use Go templating or you can use bash substrings, and you can do variable substitution into your Riofile based on conditions. So the example that they have up here is, if this is going into the namespace test and the value of foo equals bar, then include this additional service. Otherwise, you can do stuff like make sure that the environment has the key value pairs that are specified. Apparently, namespace is always set along with revision. So those are always available to you. The last thing is that you can embed Kubernetes manifests directly. So if you have a Kubernetes manifest that you want deployed alongside your service, again, Rio is designed so that you don't have to get into those Kubernetes things, but there may be situations where you need to. Then you can just attach that to the bottom of your Riofile, and those Kubernetes objects will be created for you at the same time. This leads us back to routes. One of the interesting use cases for a router is if you have a Kubernetes service, and this is different from a Rio service, but an actual service inside of Kubernetes that is sitting in front of something that doesn't have TLS protection, you can create a Rio route that points to that Kubernetes service, because a route can point to any Kubernetes endpoint. So you can create a route that points to that Kubernetes service, and the route will get a certificate from Let's Encrypt. So you can now provide SSL encryption of arbitrary services in Kubernetes, independent of things like cert manager and ingress, which is the traditional way to do it now, or I guess just cert manager directly and then mounting and mapping your certificates directly. You can run Rio and get all of that functionality in addition to all of the other stuff that Rio is providing. That's pretty cool. So let's wrap this up by deploying an application that shows what I think is a good use of the Rio file. The Rio Stack demo has this cool emoji voting app. And one thing that you notice is I am still in my Rancher demo directory. So even though we had stuff running from a local Rio file, the fact that I just ran Rio up from within this directory means that it replaced my existing stuff with what I just told it to replace. And that's fine. It's just a caveat. Watch out for that. You might be surprised. Over here, you see that we now have some new services. And if we look in the app mesh, you'll actually see that Linkerd reports what's going on here. So this is pretty cool. There's a web service that sits in front of an emoji service and a voting service, and then there's a bot that just generates some traffic. So there you go. You see it just woke up, and you can see that we're actually getting stuff that's happening. If we visit this, then we're taken to this cool little application. So you can generate 404s, you can vote for your favorite thing, and you can see how the vote bot is currently voting. So it has an algorithm where X percentage of the time it votes for donut, and then the rest of the time it just randomly picks stuff. This is using gRPC as well as HTTP and of course HTTPS. Now the real file for it looks like this. This is the simplicity that the Riofile strives for, and this is an excellent use of it. So you've got emoji service, Notice here they're providing a version, and then the image and the ports and the environment. Same thing for the other services. You've got the vote bot, tell it where to go. You've got, we don't need sample data. And then down here you have a router for Rio Emoji Router that's going to send everything to the web service app. In the near future, Rio will be at a place where the Riofile is going to be the best way to interact with it. Right now, it's not quite there, but it's there enough for basic functionality. I would still very much like for you guys to start using it, start applying it to your GitOps workflows, start putting it through its paces, and opening up issues when you find things that don't work as expected. In 2 more days, I'll be putting production workloads into Rio. It's going to be awesome.